Welcome back to UX Spotlight by Userlytics, where we explore how real people interact with real products shaping their everyday lives. I'm Dennis, your host, and today we're diving into a topic that affects every team, every product, and every user: accessibility at enterprise scale. I'm joined by Stéphanie Walter, a UX researcher, product designer, accessibility expert, global speaker, and author of the book Journey Mapping. Stephanie has more than a decade of experience in designing complex enterprise products across industries like banking, automotive, healthcare, and travel. Today, she'll help us understand what it actually takes to scale accessibility inside large organizations, not just as a checklist, but more as a real system. With this being said, let's begin with your story. How did you become such a strong voice in enterprise UX and accessibility?
So I have a background in languages, basically German, English, a native language being French. And after my bachelor degree, I went into a master degree. That was at that time preparing you to become web designers or project management for web things with translation localizations. So during the master degree, at the end, you had to do an internship, and I did my internship in Germany. Well, I was supposed to do 6 months of building a WordPress website, but in the end, it only took like 3 months. And then they asked me, "Do you know anything about iOS design?" I was like, "Nope." So here is the documentation. So we had some courses, some classes about usability, and we talked a little bit during the class about user testing, things like that. But I really kind of discovered the term UX and user experience while reading this kind of, how was it called? I think it's still called like that, like a iOS human interaction guideline, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember which version of iOS it was. I want to say 8 or 9 or something. It was more than 10 years ago. So then I was like, okay, this is actually what I was taught in class, but they call it UX. So that sounds very interesting, talking to the user and all of that. And then I kind of dug more into the topic of user research and got kind of self-taught in different methods and all of that. And then I went to work in France. And in France, I worked for a web agency, and they were specialized about accessibility. So I already knew about accessibility when you talk about buildings, when you talk about like how does a deaf person interact with people, because my mom used to work when I was a kid with a deaf person. So the lady could speak but didn't hear us. She had this gigantic red light, so whenever you would ring her bell, then she could see it. So I knew that you had like accommodation in the physical space. It was the same like at uni, we had a blind student who always got the transcript super big because he could read them if the font was very, very big. And I had a friend who was in a wheelchair. So I was kind of familiar with accommodations and making spaces accessible or flats and things for people with different disabilities. Like when I was working in France, since this agency was specialized in digital accessibility, I was like, oh, okay, so we can also make websites and computer programs and all of that accessible for disabled people. So that's really good part of UX. Basically, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that it works for everyone. So yeah, that's kind of like when things connected, I was like, okay, physical accessibility, we also have digital one and UX. And then I was like, I went to Luxembourg and I worked for a human computer interaction at the university. And there I had more kind of formal academic. So I was doing more formal academic studies. So it was also very nice to work with actual academic researcher because I was coming from B2C, a little bit of B2B and all of that. And now I work for private companies, and I'm a consultant. So meaning I'm going to work within a client company for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, depends how long they need me and how long the project lasts. So yeah, that's basically it.
Amazing. That's quite a story. You touched every single point from your childhood all the way to becoming an expert in present day, and you also have quite a variety of expertise, having been working in quite different industries. I would say from banking to healthcare and travel. For example, how did you enter these industries, and how did you decide to switch? Why healthcare from banking, or why travel?
So basically, because I'm a consultant, so I work for different mission and clients, and I like a challenge. So I did e-commerce website. I also work for blogs. I used to work for online newspapers, and but it's
Okay.
kind of always the same thing. You've done one e-commerce, you've done another one, unless you have the budget to work for super big e-commerce website, and then you can really, really do research. They have dedicated research teams. But like in an agency, most of the time you have like the small e-commerce websites and they kind of skip the research. They're like, yeah, we know what we want, do it like Amazon. If I had a penny every time someone was like, yeah, just copy Amazon. So it gets kind of boring after a certain point, at least for me, for my brain, when I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And yeah, I think every time there was, when I was working as a consultant, they're like, okay, we have this project or this project of this project. It's like, oh, that sounds like a challenge. That is something I'm kind of super interested into. And when I was working for the previous company I was working for, they developed the whole software as a service product in the automotive industry. So we had this gigantic software that had a native application on iOS, Android, that had a lot of different things, and it was very, very interesting to go to car mechanics shops or car dealerships to understand different part of this industry, from like selling the cars to repairing the cars. And the fun part is I don't even have a driver's license. So when they're like where people recruit and they want someone very specialized in a specific topic, I'm like, no, you don't necessarily need to be specialized in the topic. Like I don't drive, but still able to do research. That's the beauty of research. You learn about the industry and all of that. I worked for crane monitoring systems. I didn't know anything about cranes. I learned a lot. I worked for a portable ultrasound at some point. So I had to draw icons of different organs in the body. And again, I didn't know anything about ultrasound. So I was like, okay, you have to explain to me how this works, because I did like one ultrasound one time in my life. It was somewhere here, and that's it. So I think that's the really cool thing, and what I like about health tech and enterprise and all of that is you're going to work for people who use your tool, your software, your products to work on a daily basis. So you have really an opportunity to make their lives, their job easier or less complicated, I hope. So yeah, every time I think I kind of ended up seeking those kind of projects, because this is where you can have a lot of interesting ideas, and I think a lot of fun. But again, like maybe people have a lot of fun in B2B as well, in B2C, but I have other definition of fun.
um, and the fun thing and the nice thing about this industry and what you're doing is that you're learning a lot of things about different things that you would never think that you would research about,
Yeah.
tra- or like body organs, or just the most incredible random things that you can possibly imagine. And it makes sense that you worked in different industries like this because you're a consultant. So then you work for whoever needs your services as a consultant, evidently. Um, and I would say, now that we understand your background, maybe we can dive into the reality of accessibility at an enterprise scale. So, for example, in your opinion, what does scaling accessibility really means in a large enterprise environment?
I think you need to go beyond checkboxes, and like people need to understand it's not about like doing the checklist of WCAG, check, 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 and then it's done, because otherwise you will not get traction and you might not even get budgets. So usually you need to start with something small, I would say. Like for instance, when we started on one of my design system project, we started with fixing the color contrast issues, because it's something that is I don't want to say easy, but it's something that speaks to a lot of people when you tell them, okay, the colors and there's not enough contrast here. And some people might have issues like reading what is on the screen because the gray is super light, and also the gray is the numbers, so you don't want your users to misread the numbers on an invoice in a car dealership, for instance, or to input the wrong number or something like that. So I would say you need to start somewhere at some point. So maybe as a designer, take your matter in your own hands. Just like do an audit, like try to navigate with keyboard through your whole application and check, can someone do everything by using just keyboard, like tap, 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 space, enter, something like that. So find like one small pain point to fix and then build upon that, because you might want to fix everything at the beginning, and first it will kind of look overwhelming, I think, at some point. So you need like it's a marathon. It's not a super fast race. You're basically here for the long run, especially in an enterprise where something can take ages to move around. And then I would say if you can have some disabled people when you are doing usability testing sessions, for instance, and then you can show to people, like a friend of mine is working at the bank and he was trying to explain to the stakeholders retail bank, but that it's very complicated for a blind person to use the application, which is a problem because then as a blind person you have to show someone else your bank account if you cannot use it using the screen reader of the phone. So you basically like losing part of your independence. And what he ended up doing, he did a demo of someone recording someone trying to navigate through the app and how poor the label were and how annoying it was, and the fact that they could not, I think, even go to the numbers or something. And that kind of clicked, in the stakeholders, like, okay, there's a difference between saying someone with a screen reader can't use our application and having a recording of how the app is poorly designed and poorly coded, and how no, you see, you cannot access that and the labels, and it's very annoying. It's like, oh, okay. So I would say if you can like have some usability testing sessions with disabled people, and if you're allowed to record those sessions, just to show to people the struggle. But it's the same for UX, if you want to fix something, show someone struggling into usability testing session to, because a lot of stakeholders often they will think, yeah, it's fine, if I can do it, everyone can,
Nope.
which might not be really the case. And then when you fix things, when you approve, I would say make it visible to the old people.
Yep.
Like at the bank, I have a reputation about colors now. So whenever every time they onboarded a new developer on the project, he was asking questions about the colors. And my colleagues were like, no, you don't want to ask a question about colors to Stephanie. Otherwise, you will get a 15-minute lecture on accessibility. And it's like, yeah, true. Totally true. So it was kind of a joke, but then developer came, was like, what does it mean? Like, can you explain to me and all of that? So we made it very visible, whenever a developer was like asking me, I was like, okay, I can explain to you why we do that and why we do that with the colors. Like, that's interesting. So we made it very visible about the whole accessibility part of the design system we were building. And then you need allies, because it's not just a designer's job, it's not just a developer's job. So I would say if you have a design system, for instance, and you start building it and you want it to be accessible, accessibility needs to be part of the definition of done, definition of ready. So you need to kind
Yep.
of onboard your project owners, your project managers. But then you also want to test the components. So the QA team or the testing team, or like I'm talking about, not usability testing, like technical testing, making sure everything works as intended, as it was written in the stories. We put keyboard navigation as a constraint, and we explained what was expected for keyboard navigation. And then the testing team was also able to test what was expected for the keyboard navigation. So at the end of the day, you kind of need to train a little bit of everyone on the project, so that everyone understand, like, okay, what is my role? What is my part when it comes to accessibility? For the designer, is like, I think like there was a number that was saying 60% of accessibility issues can be avoided in the design phase, because you have a lot of things around like colors, contrast, labels, information architecture, navigation, things like that. So things that are not like technical, but also like visual and on the layout, on the structure, on the page, all of that. So if you already trained the designers, you get 60%. Then you need the developers to code this in an accessible way, then the QA, and yeah, it kind of takes a village. And then you celebrate the wins so that everyone is super happy when something works. So for me, you need to make the initiatives visible within the company. Like if you have a win, if you have a verbatim of users saying, "Oh, it's really cool that we can do the whole search just with keyboard. That's perfect." Then you celebrate and you share this with developers, with everyone to kind of like build this momentum, to keep on pushing forward.
Nope.
But yeah, it's a lot.
That it's no that that
Like
is that is very interesting indeed, and I like how you pointed out the need to show the demand for accessibility. So you actually have to show like a real life case, and maybe perhaps also appeal to the emotional part of
mm,
humans to somehow make people understand how, well, if you would put yourself in the shoes of this person, how difficult it would be for you to access or to use this system in the way that it is right now. So then let's change it. Let's make it more accessible for other
mm.
people as well. And regarding that, that's not perhaps the easiest thing to do in all corporations. So what would you say is the biggest misconceptions company have when it comes to accessibility?
Nope.
So it depends. I think in B2C, they're like, we don't have disabled people. We don't have disabled users, like. And I was working for an e-commerce website and the keyboard navigation was broken. And when you were navigating with the keyboard, you could not access the basket. So de facto, if you were someone who has to use keyboard navigation to navigate, you could add stuff to your basket, but then you were done. You could never access the basket. So it's like, I wonder why you don't have keyboard navigation clients. Well, because they cannot use your website. It's kind of the snake biting its own tail. And I think
Yeah,
that's kind of a big perception, that like, yeah, we don't have disabled people. And I think it also like the perception of disability is very kind of complex in ableist society. Meaning, when you think about a disabled person, most people will imagine someone in a wheelchair, and that's basically it, and that's kind of where they go. They might go a little bit further. They might remind, okay, there's people who are blind, there's people who are deaf, but they don't understand that disability is a spectrum. Meaning you can have people who have different kind of degrees of blindness. Like I know someone who sees like half, so something on the left, nothing
yeah.
in the middle, giant black band, again something, and then
Uh,
a fourth part is nothing. Because it's not an eye problem. It's like he had a brain surgery, and that's
okay.
the way his eyes, kind of like the connection between the eyes and the brain, work today. But usually, when you think about someone who is blind, you're like, they're completely in the dark. It's like, no, it's not the case. And it's the same for someone with a wheelchair. As like, you have some people who need a wheelchair at some point because they have different disability. They might make it so that they need it. Maybe they have chronic pain, and in the morning they need a wheelchair. Then it gets a little bit better, so they can stand up, And you have like testimonials of people in wheelchair who explain that when they stand up, you have people who say, "Yeah, but it's fake. Like you can stand and you can walk. Why do you need a wheelchair?" So the whole perception, and then there's all the invisible disability that most people don't think about, like ADHD or learning disability, cognitive function, and everything that happens when you become older. Your brain starts degenerating, like Alzheimer's and things like that. So you have short-term memory, for instance.
Nope.
So I was like, I know that if I want to have a flame war in my comments on LinkedIn, I need to post about placeholders in forms. I don't know why people want so much to put placeholders in forms, but when you explain that you cannot use the placeholder for the format, like if you want a date and you put the format in the placeholder, month, day, year, for instance, as soon as you start typing, it vanishes. And I had a horrible comment from people going like, yeah, but come on, everyone can remember for 2 seconds something. It's like, no, some people have absolute zero short-term memory.
Okay.
And so, you know, that's the kind of thing people don't usually think about when you think about disability. So I think there's a big work to do within the companies to make them understand, like, you do have disabled users, you do have disabled customers, you do have disabled colleagues, you do have disabled employees. There might not be disclosing their disability. And also, everyone is aging. This is a fact. And with
Yeah.
aging, meaning you maybe lose a little bit your eyesight, or you have hearing loss, or you work in TED for many years and then you have issue with your hand. I don't know how it's called, the canal carpien.
Yeah.
Carpal tunnel, something like that, and then it makes it harder to use a mouse, you know. So eventually, I hope we all age amazingly without problems, but statistically, it's not really likely to happen. So this whole myth that we don't have disabled employees, we don't have disabled customers, so we don't need accessibility, is just not true, you know. So if you think like that, you're de facto excluding a lot of people. And when you work in enterprise, it means that you're preventing people from doing their job. So if you impose on your employee a tool that is not accessible and that employee cannot do their job because your tool is not accessible, technically the employee can go in a lot of countries to say, yeah, this is discrimination, you know, like
Yeah.
employment discrimination, because I cannot do my job because the tool you're forcing me to use to do my job is not letting me
True.
do it. So
True. And it's also just from the purely business side. It's disabled people. Well, disabled people access your product as well, and they're willing to pay for it. So why not
exactly.
just extend the full market that you have access to? Why you exclude people who want to have your product and are willing to pay for it?
It's
Nope.
a big audience. It's like 16% of the population, and that's just the disabled people. But then they have friends, families who might
Yeah.
hear about your product, and if you're like, yeah,
True.
but I cannot use that, it's not accessible, and they say that to the friends and family,
Nope.
maybe the friends and family are like, yeah, I'm not gonna use it either then, because my friend can't, so why should I, you know?
Yep.
So yeah,
Yep.
it's
The family is
big
an aspect of
market
it as well.
actually. If we
It
think
is.
about money, I don't remember. I think it's like $3 trillion a year, something like that, in market,
Okay.
in
That's
potential revenues.
that's quite a bit of money, I would say.
Yeah,
Indeed.
trillion with a T.
Yeah, with the
I think
T.
it's a bigger market than China if you think about it in terms of numbers.
Yeah, but that's global, 3 trillion, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
global.
Well, I would say maybe we can make a shift from the organizational level to perhaps the research side. And I'm curious to know your opinion of what does accessible research looks like in practice, for example.
So for me, it means you purposefully include disabled people in your recruitment. So when you're doing user interview, when you're doing observation studies, when you're doing usability testing, you want to test with disabled people. I want to insist on the fact that they should not be doing QA testing. Meaning, for instance, if you want to test your website with a blind person, you're not testing the technical accessibility of the website. So you need to make your website WCAG, which is kind of, I don't want to say guideline, but it's like the criteria we usually follow to make something accessible. So you need to make sure that it's technically accessible, that is going to work for a screen reader. But it's the same for usability testing. You know, you want to make sure you don't have bugs. So it's the same idea.
Yeah.
You want to avoid accessibility bugs. And then
Nope.
you're testing the usability of that for a screen reader. Does it make sense? Are the label making sense? Is the navigation easy? I don't know, let's say you're working on a task application for an enterprise. Are they able to have the screen reader read the task? Are they able to access the button that says validate? Those validates make sense. Maybe it does not. So it's
Nope.
kind of a regular usability testing, and you want to test the usability of that with different people with different usability. Like same kind of colorblind person use your website, and when you work in bank or finance, often we have graph charts with a lot of colors. So you go like, okay, here's the homepage. Can you tell me in this graph is like, are we winning or losing money or something like that, So I would say purposefully recruit disabled people and run the usability testing session with them. But then it means they might need a little bit more time for the sessions, of course. I would say disabled people are experts in their own disability.
Nope.
So just ask them what type of accommodation do they need in order for the testing session, the interview session, or whatever you're going to do with them, maybe a card sorting or something. So ask them, okay, how can we make this comfortable for you? How can we make it easy? Like if it's someone deaf, for instance, do they need an interpreter? Interpret. So ASL interpreter, or in French is LSF or whatever language you speak. Do they come with the person and then you can offer to pay for the time, or do you need to find someone? Or so it's mostly about understanding their disability and then finding ways to accommodate, make sure the test runs smoothly for them, and then compensate people, which is again same rule as when you do usability testing session, compensate people for that time. But yeah, then I would say don't. You're not a doctor, so you don't really care about the medical reason why they have this disability. You're here to check or interview how they use products, how they use services. So if the person offers information, then fine, but you don't really need to know why the person is in a wheelchair, for instance, in order to build a product.
That's more personal
Unless
information.
it's a medical product and there's a direct link. So I know some people, we were working with a company for connecting bandage linked to limb training. So usually used for people who had mammectomy, I think, because then you need to go to the physio. So here we kind of you might get a little bit more into the kind of, if you work in health tech, you might get into the specifics of certain things if it makes sense for the topic. But if you work in B2B or B2C and it's very generic, then don't be intrusive, might be a little bit weird otherwise.
Look, you also have to make people comfortable, so don't ask questions that's more like their life rather than the information you just need from them. But this would touch more upon the point of recruiting people with disabilities, to do research for accessibility. But how about designing accessible research sessions in remote environments? How would you do that?
Here again, I would ask, I would check with the users, what do they need, Because, and then it depends on your tools. Like for instance, it might be complicated if you're doing a FigJam session with some users. FigJam I don't think it works with a screen reader. I think they improved it a little bit. So I would say like any research session, know your target audience, and then make sure that the tool are going to work and be accessible for your target audience. So if I have to do interview with a blind person, I will ask them, what tool do you want to use if possible? I think most of the people I talked to, they were like, Zoom is okay, but that's my experience. Maybe someone is so used to another tool. So it's again, I would say reach out to the people and ask, what tool are you used to? And maybe we can use those tools to conduct the research. So it's about making sure that they are in the best environment possible. Unfortunately, if you're using some tools, like these all-in-one tools where use the tool to do the research and the recording and all of that, if that tool is not accessible, then you might have a problem. So I would say we need also the people who build UX tools, wink wink, to make the tools accessible, so that if you want to run sessions with someone who is blind, you need to make sure it works for a screen reader, with making sure it works for keyboard navigation and all of that. So check the accessibility of the tool that you are going to use if your company paid for one of those tools. Otherwise, if there's no tool that you have to use, just ask the person whatever makes them feel comfortable and what accommodation they need. So it's kind of the same, as in person when you do remote, but it's more complicated because then, yes, If the
Nope.
tool is not accessible, there's nothing you can do about it. It's the same with the in person. If the building is not accessible, for instance, if you have a stair to access the elevator, like I've seen in many buildings in Luxembourg, it's like we have an elevator. Yes, but to go to it, there's a stair. So
Yeah.
nope. So yeah, basically check the accessibility of the tool, the path, the accommodation, and make sure the person can attend your sessions.
Okay, amazing. So check the accessibility tool and check with other compliance from the specific person that you need for the research, just to make them comfortable. That's understandable. And now I want to shift again to a different subject, and I want to talk about what designers can do in their day-to-day life, because accessibility isn't just a compliance task. So, well, for example, what is a simple, concrete practice designers can start applying today?
Nope. Nope.
I
Nope.
would say check your mockup for contrast. Just that. Like the other day, I was already cringing because someone was having like light gray text on white background. It was next to impossible to read. So just start with the contrast. This is something that will speak to most designers. Check your contrasts to make sure that you have enough contrast between text and background, between icon, graphical element, and adjacent colors. And then there's also like about the colors, you can make sure that not like that you don't convey the information only with color. So if you think about, for instance, now is the holiday, everyone is going to book some flight ticket, train tickets, and often you have these calendars, and you have like in green the cheap dates, in orange medium, and red the expensive one. The problem is if you're colorblind and you only have grid red and orange to tell you about how expensive the dates are, you are going to miss the information. So you need a secondary clue. It can be displaying a price range, it can be a system of icons, things like that. So I always say, as a designer, like making the color accessible is your job, and making sure that it works for people who are colorblind and cannot perceive the colors. That would be step one, I would say. And then I would say ask the developer to check for keyboard navigation. Is keyboard navigation working very well or not? Also, another thing you can do usually as designers, but also like UX writer, content people, is checking that the structure of the page makes sense. I've been on websites where you have like one title on the top and then like giant piece of text.
Oh yeah, I've been on these websites as well. It's very annoying when you don't know where to go. You're looking for something, but you don't know where to find it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a nightmare for people with cognitive disability, but also someone using a screen reader, because then there's not like titles. So you're like, okay, this page is about that, but it needs section or something. So on your design, I would say think about the information architecture up front before going into Figma. Like maybe draft, even if you have lorem ipsum, but I like draft the structure up front and like if you can test the structure with people just to make sure it makes sense, that's even better. So I would say the cool thing is like good information architecture, so good navigation, good structure, good titles, all of that helps accessibility, but it helps everyone. Basically, it helps screen reader users, but it also helps AI parse your content, it helps Google understand your content, so SEO, all of that. So it's big win if you can work on your information architecture, because then people and robots can find your information, can parse it, can understand it. So as designers, I would say contrast, information architecture, and then if you can have your developers check navigation.
Because AI will access your information, so you need to make it easy to understand and readable for them as well. That's something.
Nope.
It's powerful enough so that if you don't have titles, an AI would still be able to summarize,
Nope.
But it's still important to have like good structure so that it makes it easier to understand as well.
Nope.
I agree 100%. And now that we're coming to the end of the show, we can dive into my favorite part of the episode, which is the quickfire round. And just a quick summer up of this round, Stephanie, I will ask you a question, and I want you to tell me the first thing that pops into your mind when I ask you this question. There's no right or wrong answer, so just feel free to say whatever you want. Are you ready?
Yes.
Amazing. First question. Favorite accessibility guideline or principle?
Nope. Nope. Nope.
It's a new one in WCAG 2.2 is about not having people solve complex cognitive tasks to authenticate. Meaning, bye-bye shitty Captcha that no one understands, where you have a 3D figure and you need to turn the... So yeah, I like this one because it's about cognition. It's very annoying.
Okay, next question. One tool you can't live without.
Nope. Nope. Nope.
The headsets, noise cancelling headset.
Okay, does it help you concentrate or?
Yeah, it helps me concentrate. It helps me block the noise from outside. And like, I live in a kind of noisy building. It's old building,
Okay.
so it's sometimes very annoying. So yeah, concentration and being able to work.
I should get one of those as well whenever I work outside or in a coffee shop or something. Those are probably very good in those. Whenever people speak around you or you concentrate, yeah.
And I work in an open space and I have often colleagues in 3 different meetings at the same time. So I just like put the headset, put some music so I can focus when I need to.
Nope.
Okay. What is the worst accessibility myth designers still believe?
That you can't have yellow. I have a whole article about that. People still think that yellow is bad for accessibility. It's not true. You can use yellow. You can just not write yellow text on white background. But yellow, I have a yellow website and it's accessible for the colors. You can use yellow. There's no color that you can't use, basically. It's about combining the colors properly.
Amazing. Stephanie, we've reached the end of our podcast, but before I let you go, if listeners take just one actionable tip to improve accessibility in their work, what should it be, in your opinion?
Nope. Nope.
Start somewhere. Just start. It might be scary, but someone needs to kickstart the movement. And if it's not you, it might be no one in the company. So if you feel like you can start somewhere, contrast, keyboard navigation, anywhere, it doesn't have to be big, but start. Kickstart the movement and then build upon it, basically.
Just start working. Don't overthink it. Just start.
Nope.
Amazing. I like that. Apply that more often in my day-to-day life as well. And now perhaps you can also tell us, where can people find you online? Perhaps your website, newsletter, LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I'm on stephaniewalter.design, and there you have links to my LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Matomo, and I have a weekly newsletter where I publish all the cool things I read this week, tools, plugins, or just fun discoveries that I enjoyed and like. So it's weekly-ish when I'm not on holidays, but yeah, it's on the website.
Amazing. Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience. This has been incredibly valuable. And to you, listeners at home, I hope you enjoyed this just as much as I did. And I will see you in the next episode. Have a good one.
Bye.